Are we live? Good morning, book club. How are you guys all today? I'm excited and a little bit sad at the same time because this is our last week. But nevertheless, welcome to week 6. How long is this all going to take? This is the question everybody asks themselves, especially at the beginning, when essentially it's all feeling a lot bigger and more involved than we set out thinking it might be. So that's what I'm speaking to today. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I'm working today, and that is the Turrbal people in Meanjin, Brisbane, in southeast Queensland. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And today I would love to help you get an idea of, support, path forward, essentially. So we've spent the last 5 weeks together. I've been here in southeast Queensland. I've been up on the Sunshine Coast, dotting around, but trying to get a little bit of consistency and momentum with your book. We've had some people attending live, we've had some people watching the replays, and I want to assure you, before we go into this last session today, it's not going to be over after this. There's a really long path ahead, and a moderate path ahead, but this first 6 weeks, where we've just been going through the first 6 chapters of Destination Author, was really to kickstart your journey and give you a flavour of what it's going to take to write a really good, useful, meaningful book, and kind of get you on your way, get you into the habit of checking in weekly with your book if it's something that you really want to make happen. So that brings us quite neatly to what is in chapter 6, and it's all really about how long from here. We've got the container, you've clarified what the book is in those first few early chapters. You've scoped out the book, you know what's going to be inside the book, you know where you're going to call it a day and how to determine when it's finished, when it's complete, what's going in, what's being left out. You've outlined the book, so you should have a really good idea of what content is in the book, and your chapter headings, and gone maybe a bit deeper than just the chapters, like the content of the sections within that chapter and the sections within each section. If you're a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person, you may have been a little bit looser on the outline than other more planned and structured types, but that's all welcome. So you've got all this information of what it takes to put a book together and what your book is. Now it's really starting to put that into practice and get some words in the document, on the page. So in part 3 of Destination Author, I go into loads of creative practices. I go into the technicalities of writing. That sounds a little bit boring. Let me rephrase that. How to make your writing best connect with your audience. So actually that was an example of it. Instead of saying technicalities of writing, super boring, off-putting, sounds hard, give them what they want in lots of different ways. Make it sound enticing and juicy. So the ways of connecting with your audience are Really, really important. That's a really good chapter. And also knowing what works in terms of your writing environment, your writing practice itself. So that's all in there in part 3. But this is the chapter just before then where we figure out, right, how long is it going to take? When can I reasonably expect to be done with the writing and to be able to move on to the publishing part of the process? So, how long is a question that is very tricky to answer in terms of like just giving you a definitive amount of time. So what I did within chapter 6 of Destination Author is I gave you the 3 major variables. What will affect the timeline, and how it will affect it, and like what's within those variables. So those 3 variables are your research, so how well you can just spill your guts and get the ideas out of your head, or how involved the research process is going to be. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the length of the book. So I talk a lot about really how to put a book together in terms of what readers' expectations are around the length, the word count essentially, and how willing you are to learn all the new skills that you'll need to learn in order to put a book together. So once you've finished writing, there are more things that need to be done in the production part of the process and the publishing part of the process that you'll either need to learn or have the budget to outsource. So those are the 3 variables: research, length, and research and length then inform your support, really, you're getting it made into a book phase. So let's just have a look at each of those very quickly in terms. So your research will be the research of the content of your book and how well you know it, but it will also be researching what you feel is the best publishing pathway for you. In part 4 of Destination Author, I talk about the pathways that are available to you, and also a little bit about your goals around publishing and how to decide which pathway is appropriate for you for where you're at the moment. A lot of that depends on your existing audience and your existing platform for sharing your writing and launching a book. So research on your content, research on the publishing process and your options there. And let me have just a quick refresher in the book. Research on style. So you're going to be reading around your subject, but also reading more widely to see what kind of style of writing suits you. If you've already written a lot, perhaps you have a really clear voice, you know what you want to say and how you want to say it, but there could be things that pop up in other books that you want to incorporate. So researching how to write the kind of book that you want to write and what's appropriate for that. Don't try and be all things to all people is what I'm saying. So if you're writing a memoir but you're tempted to include lots of how-to stuff, there's a conflict there. If you're writing a very precise guide to something, then how much story or storytelling is really appropriate there. So have a look at the style as well. Length we have touched on. I've also got a blog post that I will link in the comments, and length is really genre specific, but it's also about how you have created that container for your book. So have a little look at pages. Where are we? Page 124 has a lot of guidance about the length of your book, and come to come to a conclusion around what you're sort of aiming for in terms of length. And then, like I was explaining before, the support or the willingness to DIY it or outsource is going to be a huge part of the how long will it take puzzle, because when it comes to getting other people involved, that's where the process can spiral off. When you're writing it, you can more or less work out the pace you're writing, you can work out how many words you're capable of writing in an hour and just multiply that out by the length of the book that you're expecting to write. But then when you get other people involved, that's when it can take longer than expected. So having a look at who you might like to work with as an editor, who you might like to work with as a designer, and getting an estimate of their timescales and their availability as well, because it's not just how quickly they can do it, but how quickly they can fit you in. So these things inform how long it's going to take. You can be in the research, now that you've scoped out your book, you could be in the research phase through to the end of the year, just like gathering your quotes, making sure that you've got excuse me, tickle, making sure that you've got all your books to reference. You've looked at maybe journal articles if it's a bit more academic, or sometimes health related or finance related. People like to look at the evidence and what's already been published and research papers and things like that. So your research can take quite a bit of time, or if you're writing your own story, boom, 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 just takes getting it out of your head. So no research at all. You're the expert in your life and you know exactly what's happened to you. So a memoir might take very little research, or it might actually mean that you are researching some things because you want to learn something that you're sharing about your experience in from different perspectives. So those variables all feed into the how long is it going to take question. And those are the three things that you need to gather information on, really, to set yourself a really realistic goal for not just the writing but also the publishing part. So I suggest having those two goals: the speed at which you're going to write, the amount that you're going to write, and the amount that you're going to research. That is all in your control. But the publishing goal, so once you have finished producing it and you've collaborated with people to produce the book, that should be another goal. So I suggest after this video today, this little class, I suggest setting those two goals for yourself. When are you going to have the first draft finished? And then there will be a self-editing phase and rewrites and all that kind of thing. And then when do you want the final version finished? And please note, that is not a week apart. That is not the last full stop goes down on your typing manically into your draft and then send it to the editor. That's not what that looks like. It can look like that if you just want to throw money at it and you want to be really hands-off, but if you're in this group, you probably want to write a really good book and be involved in the process. I'm making assumptions about who is in book club at the moment, so it will take some editing yourself. So with all that said, with the research, with the length and the support all being things that you can that will impact how long the book is going to take to write and then make, I'm sure you just want a number. Like, Kris, give me a ballpark figure of how long this is realistically going to take. So that is what I do at the end of chapter 6. I talk about those 3 variables that I just spoke about just then in some detail, and then I go on to say, you know, like what are we looking at really? So that's the part I'm going to read to you today, and it's, if you're following along, it's page in the paperback copy, it's page 131. So I've broken this down into the 5 stages of destination author. So ideation, organisation, creation, which is your writing stage, collaboration, which is your production stage where you work with other people, and destination, which is the self-publishing of your script. Okay, but how much time realistically? Taking length, support and research into account, the following are some realistic timelines based on real examples for each part of the process. Ideation, anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to several decades. So I say this because if you just get on and do it, you can come up with an idea and shape it pretty quickly. But I'm willing to bet that most people in this group have been thinking about their book a whole lot longer than they actually need to get it done. So that's why I say 1 or 2 weeks through to several decades. So in practical terms, going through all the idea testing from part 1 of this book can take as little as a week or 2. If you have insights into an existing audience or target market for your business, you've likely already tested your book to a degree, or might even be writing it in response to demand. If you're focusing exclusively on your book as your next main project, you can create your container in a few dedicated info gathering sessions. And if your idea has been floating around for a little while, you're really just making it concrete by putting it down on paper. Even if you're starting from scratch with a brand new stroke of inspiration, checking the viability of your book idea and scoping this project does not have to be a big deal or take ages. Of course, you may have known you're going to write a book, even this book, for a very long time. Some of us know from childhood that we will write a book one day. So yes, ideation can take decades, because ideas have been forming as you've collected life experience, healed, learned, studied, practiced, and done all the things that have been required of you to reach this point. Some call this letting an idea percolate. That's the practical side, but there are some emotional barriers to getting going on a book, which may stretch the ideation phase. If you're feeling conflicted, sad, guilty, ashamed, or even angry about how long it has taken you to start, you can let that go now. I've worked as a writer or editor for my whole career, and specifically as a book editor for self-publishers for most of it. Over that time, I've asked practically every author I've come into contact with, whether a client, a prospect, famous authors at conferences, published people I happen to meet on the street, one question. What made you finally start? Guess how many answers were straightforward? 0. What makes people finally get started is a mystery, but one thing is for sure. There is no forcing a book to happen before it's ready. Authors use the metaphor birthing a book because it needs time to grow on the inside before it can be born into the world. And you better believe there's a labour. Like a baby, you can't make a book come out sooner than it wants to be born. It's biologically impossible or something. So you can lay those emotions to rest now, because this book just wasn't ready until now. So that's the ideation phase. So you might recognise yourself as being roughly around that stage if you're just beginning to work on a book, okay? Organisation, from 1 to 2 weeks or as long as you like. Similarly, it could take as little as a couple of hours to brainstorm, see what kinds of things you've already written on the subject, and organise the topics into an outline. That said, just because it's only a few hours work doesn't mean it won't take you days, weeks, months, or even years to actually make it happen. Have you ever seen that meme that says something like, I just wrote an email I've been procrastinating on for 6 months, it took me 15 minutes? Well, your book outline can be like that. And also, welcome to my life, by the way. I have so many of those tiny little tasks that are open tabs in my brain that I put off and put off and put off, and then when I actually get them done, it takes 10 minutes and they cause me far more distress than they actually needed to. So yeah, definitely something that happens when you're playing around with ideas and starting to shape them into a structure and organize the order that your ideas are going to go in for a book. I think I created about 4 or 5 different outlines for Destination Author, and I forgot that I had some, and then I started the process all over again, and then I found the old one or a couple of the old ones, and I realized I had duplicated some of the work, and actually it looked quite similar, which is in a way quite a good thing, really, if you think about it, because you're substantiating that what you thought then is also, you know, still valid. But it is frustrating because you can create several outlines and never actually get started. So playing around with a book outline, notes, existing blog posts and social media scribblings can make you feel so absorbed in your book that it seems like you've already started when you haven't. Research is the same. Don't be fooled into thinking you've done more book writing than you really have. Even if you've already got all the content, getting it transcribed or copied over into your draft in some kind of order is one step closer to making your book a reality. Creation: between 40 hours and 100 hours over the course of however long you have. So there's zero point looking into how long other people take to write a given number of words. So I'm not even going to mention what's possible here. Some people write phenomenally fast, others take 6 hours over a 300-word blog post. None of that matters. All you need to know is what you can manage. Okay? It's a simple exercise to time yourself writing 1,000 words, multiply that by your estimated word count to find the total number of hours you'll need to write your book. The distribution of those hours is what determines how long it will take to get your book done. Will this be a slow burn or an intense focus? Will you write every day or do longer sessions? So I did longer sessions, and I had some concentrated weeks where I did every day of writing, which is why it took me a relatively short time to do it. I think I only took 2 or 3 months to actually write the majority of my 85,000 word book, but I'm going to give you a couple of other examples, okay? Writing habits and schedules are individual since everybody learns and works differently, so you will need to experiment. Some write little and often, adding up to a lot over a period of time. One of my clients, Tina, advocates for baby steps as part of her coaching approach and finished her work by committing to 1 sentence per day. Some days, of course, she wrote more, but 1 sentence was the minimum. She took 3 years to reach the finish line, but she made it. Others write in bigger blocks or intense sessions. One of my clients, Amber, did it this way, smashing through 40,000 words in a 3-day weekend session where she shut herself away in an Airbnb and downloaded the whole lot, just out of her brain onto the page. Naturally, most writers fall somewhere in between these extremes. What I want to emphasize here is that they both ended up in the same place. A finished book they were excited to self-publish after several rounds of editing and proofreading. The result is the same, so do what works for you. So then I go into a few pros and cons over doing it in a shorter time frame and doing it in a longer time frame. But really, it will depend what time you have available and how you can envisage getting it done. And maybe you'll blend the two. There's definitely people who have done a little bit every day and then they've booked themselves a weekend away to like get on with it for a while, and then they've continued a little bit every day working on it, or editing a little bit every day and then booking themselves a weekend away somewhere or a few days away somewhere once they had that urge to get a bit more of a chunk done. Okay. From speaking to 100 plus authors in depth about their process, I would say the range for most people is between a few weeks and 1 year, with most people being able to write a mid-length book, by which I mean about 50,000 words, in around 3 to 6 months once they start taking it seriously. However, it all depends on how many hours you can dedicate to this right now. So I would also say don't wait until you have a free weekend to lock yourself away. Start to write just as soon as you can once you have that loose outline and your research, and try and get a little bit of momentum. Get some words on the page, because what tends to happen is we invest more when we've already invested time in it. So I think there's some kind of like, I don't know what it's called, confirmation bias, or there's some kind of like bias in our brains that means that we're less likely to give up on a project that we've already invested time in. So I would say get going on it, because it's more likely to happen once you have started putting more hours in. It's even more likely to happen. Although that's not to say that people don't give up right at the end, which is absolutely crushing for me as an editor, because you know they can have 99% of the book done, but they just never make it published. They never put it up on a publishing platform, which is a whole other story we'll talk about another day. Okay, collaboration. So this is the production part of the process where you actually make the book happen by collaborating with other people. So collaboration, around 3 months. So finishing your draft can feel like a cruel joke, because it feels like you're done, and then because you've finished writing, and then there's a whole lot more coming. Okay, the production of your book, where you start collaborating with professionals to turn it from a document on your computer into something that you can hold in your hands, involves a lot of moving pieces and people. It can be frustrating because the more people you rely on, the more chance of the timeline unraveling. The good news is the jobs that need to be done in the book production phase can run concurrently. For example, you need to wait for the final edits before the manuscript is typeset, but you can get on with your cover design or keyword research in the meantime. As a guide, editing and design take a matter of weeks or months going back and forth, if you're organised and the people you work with deliver on time. Organised means you know that your contractors may have a lead time, especially if they're in demand, so contacting them in advance to secure a space. Booking your editor can also be great accountability, but know thyself. Some people work great to a deadline, while others will hate this and do everything they can to sabotage themselves once they've got a date in mind. All I ask is that you don't contact your editor and say you're ready to start editing the week before, or that you're launching next month. That's a real thing that more than one person has said to me before. Set a date for your book release at least a couple of months after the editing delivery date, so that you can finalise the book, get it typeset and formatted and ready for upload, and you don't have to stress the stress of wondering if the book will be ready on time. So what a lot of people think is that editing is the last part. So it's not the last part. Yes, you have the writing to do, and you think that your part is mostly done, and then the editing is somebody else doing it, but that is a lot of work for you as well. When you're going back and forth with the edits, it can be more work than people realize, because it does require your input. I think a lot of people think editing is quite passive, but it's not. You're very involved in editing. You're going to read your book a number more times. But then that's not the end of the process either. Once you've got the book finalized, it still needs creating. So it needs typesetting, which means page design, and then you will order a copy that has this across the front. This is called a proof copy, and it's actually the one that I read from because I've got scribbles all over it. So the proof copy is your first time that you've uploaded the typeset designed copy, and you order a copy to check that what is in the print book is the same as what you intended in your manuscript. And the reason that you do that check is because typesetters are not linguists, okay? So typesetters, they're not reading the content. I mean, they might, just to kind of put things in the right place, but they're not very deliberately reading word for word everything that you've written and making sure that it hangs together with the right thing. So you can get like bullet points at the top of the page, but the introduction to the bullet points on the page before. So all of those things have to hang together, obviously. You don't want to say, here's a list of blah, 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 and then turn over the page to find the list, okay? So things like that is what you check the proof copy for. And so that takes a little bit of time. Turning it into a digital file for an ebook, that takes a little bit of time, maybe just a couple of days, but all of these things are going to stretch that timeline out. So editing does not take you right up to hitting publish, okay? And there's also other assets, which I do mention in Destination Author, the assets that you need to have ready to upload to your platform. And it's not just the book manuscript and the cover, it's also all the copy that sits around the book, even your keywords and your categories and things like that. All right, so give yourself a little bit of time to make the book a book. Okay, so the last little bit, so part 5 of Destination Author and part 5 of the publishing process is of course publishing. So this is just the upload and the bit where you hit publish and make it available for people to buy. So publishing, from 3 days to 3 years depending on your choices. The time between finalising all your assets, manuscript, cover design, sales copy and publishing information, to the book being available for the public to buy differs from publisher to publisher, but it can be as little as 72 hours on an accessible platform like Amazon, around 6 weeks with self-publishing distributor Ingram Spark, or upwards of 2 or 3 years with a traditional publisher. In a later chapter of Destination Author, I discuss the differences between those different platforms, so don't worry about that now. You can be thinking about it, you can be researching it, you can be reading the later chapters of Destination Author, but your priority is to get your draft done right now, okay? So but there are those different timelines depending on whether you want to self-publish, indie publish, or traditionally publish, okay? Of course, there's more to it than hitting publish. Your launch will need to be designed with the release date in mind. That's to say, leaving plenty of time to warm up your readers. In fact, if you've committed to doing this whole book thing, you can this is where I trip over my own book. Your launch will need to be designed with the release date in mind. That's to say, leaving plenty of time to warm up your readers. In fact, if you've committed to doing this whole book thing, you can take your audience on the writing journey with you, starting now. It's never too early to create interest in your book, if you've committed to it. Don't say you're writing a book and then don't write it, okay? Because obviously that will undermine your readers and your audience's ability to trust you. But once you've really committed to it, I suggest starting to seed the idea that a book is coming. By knowing realistic timelines for each of these stages, you can now choose a release date and work backwards from there to figure out your milestones. The alternative is you stop planning now and just get writing. People who love research can often hang out in the organisation phase way too long, but you have to move on eventually if you ever want your book published. Your book will evolve, you will form a relationship with it. Now it's time to believe that it will tell you where it wants to go. Trust the process. You have permission to break away from the plan, to play, to experiment, and you also have more clarity than most people who take this trip. Be bold now and start writing. So that really is the end of the 6 weeks, the planning and the organisation phase of your book. Should be relatively complete if you've been taking your book along on the week by week that we've been doing and reading those chapters and implementing them. So now it's just time to get some words down, get that momentum, keep going with it, and please keep me posted. Obviously I'm not going away completely. So I'm going to just finish up today's session by telling you my intentions for the group going forward. So this was the first time I've run book club and done a live version of the book. So I want to do it again. I will keep bringing people into the fold and running live book club sessions where we go through those first 6 weeks, or 6 chapters I should say, over the course of 6 weeks of the program. So if you didn't follow along this time and you haven't gotten into Destination Author, I will be running a live 6-week book club in the new year, so all is not lost, or you can be reading it on your own. You don't need the hand holding. I like to be able to connect with my readers, and this is how I'm doing it. So yeah, I will be running it again. If you have been following along and you've got that momentum, keep going and get the writing part finished. Like I said earlier in today's class, part 3 of Destination Author goes into all those writing practices, so you can have loads of ideas of figuring out what works best for you and getting some momentum with that. I include quite a lot of examples in there, because I really want to show you that there's no right way to do this. It can look like all sorts of different things. And yeah, then there's more information in the book, of course, about the production phase and actually getting the book created and ready to go. So wherever you are, please stick around. I might pause the group in a couple of weeks once anyone's asked any questions that they need. I'm going to pause the group over Christmas and the New Year so we can have a break, and then I'll do another push to get some people in January, and we'll do another live round then. I'm also going to be asking for some feedback, because I really want to make this group as helpful as possible. Of course, discussing Destination Author is great, but what I really want to see is you implementing it and having that writer's life, that writer's experience, that book in your hands at the end of the day. And I know that there are lots and lots of different pathways and lots of information out there, but I really would love to support you in making that happen and give you the tools to find the best pathway for you, because the pathway looks all sorts of different. It can look like all sorts of different things depending on your choices. So this is the place to ask those questions. And I'm going to do one last office hours on Thursday for the 6 weeks. Then like I say, pause the group and we'll kick back into it in the new year. In the meantime, if you want to connect with me while the group is paused, you can always inbox me, just DM me. Over on Facebook, Kris Emery Editorial is my Facebook page for my business. Kris Emery Editorial on Instagram. Or you can email me, kris@krisemery.com, and just, get in touch. Let me know where your book is at. If you need an editor because you're at that phase, then brilliant. Those are the services that I offer in my business as well. So get in touch and keep in touch and keep me posted on how the book is going. I can't wait. I hope this time next year I am in your book clubs and reading those books along with you, because you're able to hold your book in your hand. That's really what I would love to see from you, and I will really look out for those, and I hope to see you soon. Take care, and thank you so much for being in book club for now. I've really enjoyed presenting for the last 6 weeks, and I can't wait to crack into it in the new year if you're joining us for another round. Take care, bye.